So, all right, well, welcome. All right, so we're up to 28. Well, I guess we're 27 because Liz has counted twice. Anyway, so I think maybe let's go ahead and get started. So, all right, so for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Holly Zickler. I'm the president of the South Florida Dressage Association. I have some of my board members here tonight. So Daphne Plug also has the same logo as I do there. So she's our vice president, and Natalie Perlin runs some of the, she's part of our board unofficially, but we sort of took away her thing, but we'll give it back to her soon. So, and then Kelly Kaspersky is our secretary. And then I wanted to say hello and thank you very much for joining us, Emily Mullins and her Brazos. I'm gonna.
You said it right.
Okay. Okay. Association of Classical Horsemanship.
Yes.
In College Station, I guess.
So yes, we're based in the Bryan College Station area. So
in Texas.
Wider area being Aggieland or the Brazos Valley in Texas. I'm going to do a quick plug since we have some non-Brazos Valley area Texans on here. We have our first show coming up on March 13th, if I'm remembering that correctly off the top of my head, in Independence or Brenham, Texas. So it's a little closer for you Georgetown people. And it's at a beautiful facility that it still blows me away that we get to ride there. So if you're interested, let me know.
Terrific. And I just wanted to say, you guys, we're going to get real familiar with them because we're gonna pal around with them with some other virtual events this year. So anyway, so everybody say hi. So anyway, so and then I want to introduce Florence Wetzel, who is from is our bit fitter, our lecturer, our virtual clinician, our everything this evening for Neue Schule Bits. And then she has a wonderful story to tell us about. You'll tell us everything anyway that you're interested to know, but about bit fitting, but probably your frustration and how you got to be a bit fitter and all of that. So anyway, and the only other thing I was going to say is just because we're now up to 30 people. So for you, Florence, because you're probably going to still want to see the whole like all of us, on the screen. But for anybody who's not that familiar with Zoom, if you go up to view, you can click on speaker so that we can make Florence bigger. Okay, so I thought maybe that might be helpful. So in case that was a problem for anybody, I just wanted to mention that. So all right, so I'm good now. I'm just here to man the door now. So
so when would you like to get started?
I think we're good to get started now.
Okay, good. So I want to thank you all for sharing your evening with me to talk about something that I love to talk about. People, I may not necessarily remember people's names, but I do remember their horse and what bit they go in. And people will call me and say, oh, Bobo, you did Bobo's bits. And I said, oh, yes, he's in a 5 3/4, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, whoa. And I'm like one of those guys that can talk about on the 5th hole, the 3rd club, with the orange ball, I did something playing golf. But I remember that with bits. So I am one of 4 UK Lantra certified bit fitters in all of North America. Now, what does that mean? Lantra is like the UL seal of approval that the UK uses for example, master saddlers or master electricians, master plumbers, because England has had what were guilds traditionally all the way back to the 1400s. And bit fitters who are actually called Lauriners, and Laurinary science is the study of bits. Actually, their guild started in the 1400s and has been going on since that time. So I am actually a Lauriner, and the 4 of us that are certified, one of those persons is the actual president of Neue Schule. We got certified at the same time. There's a gal in northern Quebec, and there's a gal in New York that also is a certified bit fitter through the UK. And what that means is that we've passed pretty rigorous studies. We have been able to demonstrate that we know something, maybe not all of it, but we know something about bits and bridle fitting. And I was telling a story before many of you came on that I even learned something in the last 3 or 4 days about my own horse and the size of a bit. And I was very surprised. I bid about 1,000 horses a year. Even in the COVID year, I did several hundred horses. So I have my hands at a lot of mouths. I watch a lot of horses go. I hear a lot of people talk about their horses, and I am always learning about bits. But Holly said, well, why don't you tell people about how you became a bit fitter? In 2007, I imported a very, 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 very expensive Dutch horse, a Grand Prix Dutch horse. And I thought I was going to go out and lickety split. I was going to do it all. And I got here. And first of all, when he got off the trailer, I thought, holy crap, I bought a pony because he was only 16 hands. And then I realized I couldn't ride one side of him. And I think all we did was piaffe for the first 2 months everywhere we went, which was very dynamic, of course, and very dramatic, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And that started really a 10-year odyssey on how can I learn to ride this horse. And I went through 4 custom saddles at several $1,000s a piece. I've had acupuncturists, chiropractics, vets, MRIs, nuclear scintigraphy, you name it, trying to find out how I could better ride this horse. Because it wasn't that I didn't have the skill to ride the horse. There was something that caused this horse not to be very rideable. In fact, I had friends who were on our Olympic team. I would take the horse to them. They would do all the tricks, hand the horse back to me and say, well, good luck with that one. And so I cried an ocean of tears. And I was down here in Florida riding, and somebody said, oh, there's this company that has a bit that's made for what that horse does. I was like, get out of here. You're full of crap. A bit. Yeah. And so I started to do some research, and sure enough, Neue Schule had a bit that was for horses that peacocked. And what peacocking is horses, they drop their back, they push the base of their spine through their chest, and they bring their neck up so it's about 2.5 inches from your nose, and it's like riding a jackhammer. And I thought, okay, I'll try it. I will try it. So I started calling all over the United States to see if I could find this bit to try this bit, because after spending $21,000 in saddles, I didn't want to spend another $300 for a bit. And I couldn't find the bit. I called everywhere. No one had the bit. So just so happens that I was in Home Depot, and I'm standing in the front of Home Depot, and in through the door walks somebody with Neue Schule on their shirt and a Neue Schule hat. Whoa! You know, I'm thinking, okay, what's the likelihood of that? You know? So she says I stalked her. I didn't stalk her. I did follow her closely because she was on the phone, and I waited very politely until she hung up, and I said, hi, you don't know me, this is my name, this is what I'm looking for. And she said, oh yeah, we can get you that. I didn't realize here it was the president of Neue Schule USA, and she lived 20 minutes from me here in Florida. And she came over, I put that bit on my horse's bridle, this particular curb on my horse's bridle, and he went down, and he got soft and was rideable. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me.
Wow.
I was blown away. And so that was like, okay, now there's something to this. There's something to this, because I was so desperate, I went to a communicator, and I thought I was going to try anything to be able to ride this horse. And here it was a bitting problem. And I put those bits on, and we never looked back. So that piqued my curiosity. And I had further conversations with Meta Larson, is the president of Neue Schule USA. I went to her farm. I made a pain in the butt of myself, following around, asking about the bits, and going with her on bit fittings and talking to her about each one of her horses and what I would do for the bits, because then I started to study, and I got to study, and then I enrolled in the Neue Schule Academy, and then the rest of it came from there. So that's how I got involved in Neue Schule and becoming a bit fitter, and that was from personal need. And I have found so many examples where people have done everything and never thought about a bit. So that's what we're here to talk about. Most of the bits that we are still using today have been in use for 5,500 years. That's a long time. So if you use a loose ring snaffle, this happens to be a Bridle, but if you use a snaffle with a regular 70mm ring, that has been in use, that style, since 3200 BC. What we use in dressage as a curb, 3200 BC, or a pelham, 3200 BC, 5,500 years, we have basically been using the same bits. We got a little fancy in the late 80s, early 90s. We started using rubber and plastic with the same basic bits, same styles. Then we thought we were really being inventive, and we got sweet iron. What do you think they did in the Bronze and the Copper Age? And when iron just started to come into use, into bits. I mean, we're just kind of recycling things again. Early bits, they used wood, they used bone, they used antler, they used sinew, rawhide, twisted horsehair. They were all early bits. And rope halters, or a lot of natural horseman people, they think, oh, look at this fancy rope halters. If you look at Grecian pottery, Roman pottery, there's some dude leading the horse with a rope halter or a rope bridle. We've been doing the same thing for thousands of years. So very little about bitting changed. What did change was the introduction of science into bits. Hillary Clayton. Most of us have heard of Hillary Clayton, or read part of at least one article that she's written. She's in the University of Michigan. She is one of the preeminent researchers for equine science. And they now have the ability to study dynamically what happens when there's a bit in a horse's mouth. They use different types of photography. They use different types of radiographs to study what bits are doing. They have different ways to collect saliva with different types of bits. So they have not just, well, we kind of sort of guess, think maybe, but now they have hard scientific information and research to back up what they think they know about bits. And this certainly has changed everything that we thought we knew how bits work into, hey, we know how some of these work, and the importance of having the right bit. One of the things that I'm going to do in our discussion this evening, I think it's a little self-serving on my part, is because I want to talk about, I'm going to call them wise tales, because there are certain things we learned either from Pony Club, if we are involved with Pony Club, or it was passed down from generation to generation, from rider to rider to rider. Like, for example, foam. How many people think foam's really good? A lot of foam in a horse's mouth. Okay, so at least somebody admitted it. Okay, 2 people admitted it. Okay, so I have offered, and the offer stands, $100 to anybody who could bring me a photograph of horses at liberty in a field, tearing around, having a grand old time with foam. You won't find it, because you won't. Because foam is something that we create. Foam, if you've ever had in your life put cheap silverware in your mouth and you taste metal, have you ever experienced that? Like you've been in a not so fancy restaurant and put a spoon in your mouth and you think, God, this tastes like metal. Okay, so the ions in the metal of what that spoon is made of is actually interacting with the acidity in your saliva, and that's what you're tasting. You're tasting the metal ions leaching out of that utensil. And that's what happens. The acidity in horses' saliva interacts with the metals coming off the bit. And so you have lots and lots and lots of foam. Well, horses, they can only breathe through their nose. Horses don't breathe through their mouth. Like we can breathe through our nose or our mouth. So when they have lots of foam and they're trying to close their throat off so they can breathe, or open their throat up so they can swallow, and they have all that foam, what do you think happens? That's a pretty tough road to hoe. So, that's one of the things, a moist mouth, yes. So we want moist, almost like the got milk commercials, a little bit of foam, that's fine. But you don't want tons of foam. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, and I would stand at the rail at Devon, and I would watch the Grand Prix horses go, and all the spit was flying and the foam's going everywhere. And I would think someday I'm going to be a Grand Prix rider and I'm going to have all the foam flying. And then I realized you don't want all the foam flying. You don't. You're not helping your horse. So that's one of the wives' tales that we've hung on to that really is not a good thing. Another thing is I want to talk about in our bits, the shape of the ring. All right. So when I go into dressage barns and I'm watching horses go, and I'll say, we need to put that horse in a fixed cheek. Well, some of what I have comes in both an egg butt and a D ring. Some of what I have only comes in a D ring. And the dressage people will say, don't you have that in the egg butt? The hunter people ride in D rings. And then I hear someone's laughing. Then I go into the hunter barns and I say to the hunter person, hey, that horse needs to go into a fixed cheek. But the bit that's good for him only comes in the egg butt. And they say, oh my God, the fruitcake dressage people ride in egg butts. Don't you have it in a D ring? A fixed cheek is a fixed cheek. Whether it's a D or it's an egg butt, they're the same bits. They function the same way. All right? Where you get a little different in fixed cheek is if you have a full cheek. And especially if you take a full cheek and you put the little loops to the cheek piece and the top of the full cheek bit, that changes it. But a fixed cheek is a fixed cheek is a fixed cheek. It comes to like whether you like black shoes or brown shoes. If it's the same style of shoe, it doesn't matter what color it is because it feels the same. So that's another wives' tale thing. D's and egg butts, they're exactly the same. Another wives' tale, all right. Your Bridle is a 1/4 inch larger in most cases than your curb, since we have mostly dressage people here. All right, one more time. The Bridle is a 1/4 inch larger than your curb. The reason being, Here we got our curb. Here's our curb. Our curb should lay really with the cheek hanger right against the side of the face. It shouldn't be sticking. I have some people have it the inverse. They think the curb should be bigger than the Bridle. And so you have this curb going back and forth like a harmonica the whole time the person is riding. So the Bridle also why we have a small ring. The small ring is so that it doesn't interfere with the cheek hanging of the curb. I have two ladies, one in Vancouver and one lady here in Florida somewhere, insists on riding in a regular snaffle size ring on a double bridle. Can they do it? Yes. Is it legal? Yes. Is it functionally sound? Not so much. But the Bridle, 1/4 inch larger than the curb. Then I want to talk about shank length. All right. How many people think that longer shanks are harsher than shorter shanks? Okay. Wives' tale. All right. So this is a 7 centimeter shank. This is standard 7 centimeter shank. If I'm gonna hold it this way so that I think it's easier to explain. So here we have the bits on the horse's face, and we have the rein coming this way. So when you take the rein and the bit starts to go, it travels a certain distance. A shorter shank has less of a distance to travel. So the shorter the distance, the faster the pull. The longer the distance, the longer the distance, the slower the bit. So it's it's like doing one of those, I think it's algebra questions about, you know, 2 trains leave the towns and one goes 50 miles an hour at this distance and one goes 20 miles an hour a certain distance, who gets there first, et cetera, but longer shanks, 7 centimeter shank standard is kinder than a 5 centimeter shank because it has less of a distance. That shorter shank has less of a distance to travel, so it is faster. So for the most part, I don't like to sell 5 centimeter shank bits. Will I do it if asked? Yes. But I tried to have a discussion on why are you going to a 5 centimeter shank? And people say, well, it's kinder. No, it's not kinder. It's faster. And most of us, when we get in the heat of battle in the ring, we are not really thinking as we would normally do, just riding in our backyards. And we have a tendency to perhaps pull a little bit more than we should. Where things get different is in some of the other leverage bits. Yes, a curb is a leverage bit, but basically we're riding off the Bridle, and this helps us with our collection. Curb chains. Should curb chains be tight or loose?
Tight,
Why?
because I was told that by my trainer.
Okay, that's true.
Okay.
Okay.
The looser,
Yes.
the harsher the bit.
I will
Yes.
say I've sent a horse up in the air because I unknowingly put its curb chain too tight.
Oh dear.
Wow. Okay, so the curb chain should be fairly snug because the reason for the curb chain is to control how far the shanks travel. That is what the curb chain, which is up here, its job is to control how far we can pull these shanks. The looser the curb chain, the further we can pull those shanks. Now, I did some bidding for Hillary Clayton, and we were sitting there she rides Arabians, and we were just doing snaffles, but somebody was in the ring, and I was doing 2 horses at the time. And she was talking about some research that she was doing, that they found that some horses have so many nerves and vessels in the chin groove that you could actually stop them, because even though your chain is snug, it should have a guard on it. Whether it's one of those little rubber guards, or the Alcabello gel chain guards, or the Equifit guards, you should have a guard on your chain. Just so that, yes, it could be snug, but that you are not digging into those nerves. So a snug chain, not a loose chain, about a 7 centimeter shank, not a 5. You'll see a lot of hunters will ride in a 3 centimeter shank bits, but they don't touch the reins. Everybody's floating the reins because they don't touch them until they get themselves in trouble, and then they're grabbing at the reins, and then they want a quick action because they're in trouble. So
instant gratification.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about how bits work. A lot of people don't understand how bits work. I'm going to talk about snaffle bits first of all. Whether it is a loose ring or a fixed cheek like an egg butt, all right? When you take rein tension, snaffle bits turn clockwise. So again, whether it's a fixed cheek or a loose ring, when you take rein tension, the bit turns clockwise. And it's the turning of the bit. Do you ever wonder how come all the rings get dirty all the time? You think, why is that ring dirty all the time? Because it's always turning. This ring is continually turning. That's why size is so important, because people will say, oh they'll send me pictures before we do their bits, and I can see the scarring on the hair, or the scarring in the pigmentation on the commissures of their mouth, because the rings aren't turning. It's always rubbing. You'll see some people will put Vaseline there because the bits aren't maybe the exact size they should be. But the bit always, these rings are continually turning clockwise, and the bit itself turns clockwise. The curb bit, or a pellum, where the rein attaches below the mouthpiece, this being the mouthpiece, these bits go counterclockwise. A lot of people you never think about it. You think, oh, it does something in there. But while the Bradoon is going clockwise, the curb is going counterclockwise. And that's how they work together. One of the things that, especially if you're riding in the double, it's really important to do is to make sure that the bits are not on top of one another. And when I go to do a lot of double, I do a lot of first doubles. The people will say, I'll say, let me see what you're using. Let me see. And they put it on, and here the bit is either here or the bit's underneath it, canceling it out. Could you imagine? It'd be like you trying to run with a walnut in your shoe. You can't. So one of the things that I ask people to do when we do double bridles is you take your index finger, right where the side of the mouth where the two bits they come together, just stick your finger in there. There are no teeth in there. You're not going to get your finger bitten off, but it's going to give you a good idea whether your bits are on top of one another, or if you can slide your finger in there very easily, they're in the right position. So if you ride a double, next time you go to the barn, if you go to the barn tomorrow, take your finger, slide it between those two bits, see where they are. See if your Bradoon is hanging too low, or maybe you have your curb pulled up too high. Another wives' tale. All snaffles should have 2 wrinkles. We all know that. Now, I bit 1,000 horses a year. My own horses, I think, I have 1 wrinkle, and I go to the other side. No, I have 2 wrinkles. And I come back to the side and I say, no, maybe I have 3 wrinkles. I mean, you know, we all think we question ourselves. Do we have 1 wrinkle, 2 wrinkles, 3 wrinkles, no wrinkles? Okay, some bits, yes, 2 wrinkles. Some bits, for example, like the Neue Schule turtle bits. Now I'll talk about this because it's a very unique bit. Never more than 1 wrinkle. Never more than 1 wrinkle because of how this bit is made to sit. So one of the things that I teach people to do is right where your cheek hangers come under your bit, lift up on it. Just stick your fingers under the bit and lift upwards, your thumbs, lift upwards, and see how much gap you have in the cheek hangers. Does everybody follow that? So where the bridle comes down and attaches to, the bridle itself attaches to the snaffle, right? And you think, okay, I think I have it adjusted correctly. And you think maybe I have 2 wrinkles, maybe I have 3 wrinkles, I'm not really sure. Just take your fingers underneath where the bridle itself attaches to the snaffle and lift up and see how much pressure. If you are pushing up and the leather doesn't come out about 1 inch away from the horse's face, then you have too much tension. Because the more tension that you have from over the pole, down the face and into this, the more pre-tension you have, the less rein tension you have. And we communicate with them through our hands. So you need to make sure that you don't have too much pre-tensioning on the snaffle, because they can't, if you have this thing pulled up here, and bits can, that's what the commissures of the mouth, the corners of the mouth, their job is to stretch. If you have stretched them and put too much tension here on the bridle, you actually have lessened your ability to communicate with your horse. So just stick your thumbs underneath there and feel, lift up on the bit itself and feel how much tension you have or don't have. If you see that you have a big gap, when you lift up on the bit and you have a big gap in the leather, then you don't have it up high enough. So you want about 1 inch, 1.5 inch space between when you lift up on the bit, between the side of the horse's face and that leather. You'll get the feel for it. Just lift up on it and see what it feels like.
Florence?
Yes.
Yes. We actually have a couple of questions. One
Sure.
I missed when we were talking about the curbs. So Natalie asked how the shank length is measured, and I'm going to give you both questions right now because we're kind of going back to the double bridle anyway.
Yes.
And then why I wanted to know is when you put your finger in the mouth, how should it feel so that you know that it's correct?
Good questions. Good questions.
So,
I'm trying to think where my ruler went. Do I have my ruler? I always have a slide rule in somewhere getting ready for this. Oh, here it is. Okay. So my tape measure. So in measuring a bit, let me tell you a couple things. First of all, how you measure a bit. You find where the 0 is on your tape, or some tapes, they start at the end, correct?
mhm.
You're going to go from inside one shank to inside the opposite shank. That tells me what this mouthpiece is. So if I were to measure this bit and I look on my tape, this is a 5-inch mouthpiece. So you measure below from inside one shank to inside the opposite shank. To measure the shank length, we start at 0, right underneath here, right underneath the mouthpiece, and we go down to right where it curves, right where the bottom is. See where the bottom is right there?
Mhm.
And that is 7 centimeters. No. It's 7 centimeters.
Okay.
All right, that's how you measure that. Width of bits, well, I actually have a gauge that I use. It's a scientific instrument that I measure, but you know, I can look at most bits and say, oh, this is a 14 millimeter thick bit. This is a 16 millimeter bit. I can look at the various thicknesses and I know how thick they are. But the other thing you could do is using a tape with centimeters, millimeters. You literally lay it underneath the bit and measure it, the thickness that way. But look at most of the cards that come with bits. Most manufacturers like Neue Schule will include a card, and the card will tell you how many inches it is, how many, it depends on what country they come from. Because these are from the UK, we'll do it in inches and in millimeters. Your curbs, it will tell you the thickness of the mouthpiece itself, and it will also give you the shank length. But most curbs are either 14 millimeters thick with a 7 centimeter shank, or they could be 16 millimeters thick, most, with a 7 centimeter shank. Of course, there are 5 centimeter shanks, there are 9 centimeter shanks. I think Stephen Peters is the only one I deal with that has a 9 centimeter shank for just a very 1 or 2 horses. But they must be incredibly sensitive, and he's an incredible rider, so he can pretty much do what he wants. When you are measuring snaffle bits, because I'm going to ask those of you that are participating in the virtual fittings to give me the size of the bit that you're riding in now. The reason why I need to know this is you're going to send me some photos. 3 of those photos of your horse, the right side of the horse, the left side of the horse, and straight on. And what I'm looking for is I'm going to be looking particularly at how this bit fits on that bridle in your horse's face. If you measure it and say, I'll say, well, how big is that bit? And you say, oh, it's 5 3/4. And I see this much of that bit hanging out of the side of that horse's face when there's no rein tension taken on. Let me tell you what happens when you take rein tension on. There's about this much sticking out the side of that face because the lips compress. And so you will see, if you stand at the ring and really watch the bit in the mouth with bits that aren't fit right, you will see this much hanging out the side of the mouth if a bit's not fit. So in order to measure a snaffle, regardless whether it's a loose ring or it's a fixed cheek, you're going to take your tape measure again. You're going to start at 0 right underneath here. This tape starts at 0 right there. And I'm going to measure down right to there. And it's going to tell me that this bit is a 5 3/4. And this happens to be a 5 3/4 I'm sending out to somebody tomorrow morning. So the same thing with the loose ring. If I were to measure a loose ring, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my tape. I'm going to start at 0. And I'm going to measure from inside one ring to inside the opposite ring. And we have 6 inches. So that's how you measure a bit. I have people that will take the tape and they'll start it at like 3 or 4 and they bring it down here and it's showing me, and then I have to blow the picture up and count. So it's really important that you start at 0, inside the ring at 0, and to show me a picture of where it ends here. All right, really important. The question we had about what it feels like when you stick your finger in the side of the mouth. Okay, when you stick your finger in between those 2 bits, you're going to feel the curb on one side. You're going to feel the curb here, like this. Here we are. And I'm going to feel right behind it. Let me see. I'm going to feel right behind it. There's my finger right here, right there. There it is. I'm going to feel the back of the bradoon. It's going to be like a sandwich. Let's see. It's going to be like a sandwich. There's my finger right here. And I'm going to feel those. It'll slide. Now, you'll feel the bits part. As you stick your finger in, you're going to feel them part a little bit. If the bits are sitting on top of one another, like here, you won't be able to get your finger in there. You're going to feel yourself run into it. But you should be able to slide your finger right in between those two bits and feel that your finger is parting those bits to either side. Any other questions?
Melena asked, she said, how important is the type of metal the bit is made of?
Good question. Excellent question. All right. So there's all kinds of, there's some people that the Springer bits are made of Agurian or Sensigram. That is just sort of fancy words for stainless steel. There are people who like sweet iron bits because they want that foamy mouth. Well, we talked about that earlier. The Neue Schule bits, and one of the reasons that I like Neue Schule bits is because they have almost no bioavailability. Now, what does that mean? That means they don't taste like anything. They don't smell like anything. Like I will take some bits and I will smell them, and it's so nasty, not because the horse had bad breath or the person feeds them too many treats, but because the metal is yucky metal. It's recycled. A lot of manufacturers use recycled metal because it's inexpensive. And I've actually seen x-rays of bits, and you could see all the little pieces of metal that's in the bits. It's used car parts, wash machines, all ground up. It's all recycled. So Neue Schule's bits, it is a proprietary mixture. It has copper in it. It has chromium in it. It has a little brass in it. That's what gives it the shiny color. I think it has some zinc. A lot of bits have zinc in them. So this is one of the reasons that this bit, because of its formula, doesn't taste like anything. Most other bits also are very hard. Neue Schule bits are hard enough to do the job, soft enough that they don't send shock waves up through the teeth. So the camera doesn't have detailed enough here for you to see it, but this egg butt that I'm sending out, it's been tried once before. There are tiny little marks on it. I could take a brand new bit. This bit is still on the card. If I give it to you, put it in your horse's mouth, and you go from A to E, and you turn around and you come back to me at A, and I take that bit out, there's going to be little tiny dents and scratches in it. It's supposed to do that. That's what the metal's supposed to be. It doesn't mean that the bit's ruined, that the bit's defective. That's how it's supposed to be. The other thing about these bits, which is different than many other bits, is these bits, because of the metal mixture, has high thermal conductivity. Now, what does that mean? For us here in Florida, I don't know what the temperature is where you are in Texas, Emily, but here in Florida, we don't really have to worry about cold. But high thermal conductivity means, especially if somebody is, for example, in a colder environment, that the minute this bit goes in the horse's mouth, it comes up to the same temperature as the horse. So you could see, if I were up in Philadelphia where I used to be, and we used to walk around with the bits in our hands, and we'd put them in our shirts or in our jackets, or we'd wrap tea cozies around, little bit cozies around them, or people had these plug-in things that you would wrap the bits in to keep them warm. You don't need to do that with a Neue Schule bit. Now, the inverse of that is, for example, if I am out bit fitting and I'm not in a covered arena and these bits are laying in the sun, I literally have to cool them off in a bucket of water before I use them. So It's just something to be aware of. It's like down here in Florida, you don't want to turn on the garden hose and watch your horse unless you run and make sure the temperatures of that water is not going to scald the horse, correct? So, yes. So, you know, you have to feel the bit, but it's a proprietary metal. Before I forget to mention it, two things that I commonly encounter. About 70% of the bits I encounter are too large. About 50% of the bridles I encounter, the bits are on upside down.
Oh my.
And that's even being in some of the best, biggest, fanciest, ooh la la barns in Wellington. They'll go in, and yes, they've ridden in 4 wegs. And I'll say, yeah, but that's upside down, that's upside down, and I don't even know what you're attempting there, right? And they blame it on the grooms, right? But many manufacturers, not all, and not all manufacturers with all their bits, will put a little triangle on the left side. That left side triangle always points to the nose, all right? I've seen people say, well, I called the Dover store and they told me it goes on the right and it's pointing forward. Well, yeah, yes, it's true. It's pointing forward, but it's upside down. Bits have a front and a back, a top and a bottom, and a left and a right. And people say, well, the curve's right. I know the curve's right. What does it matter? But see, remember, these are poured. And so the molds are done certain ways. They're poured to be balanced in a certain direction. And to have a top, to have a bottom, to have a right, have a left. If I would show you some other manufacturer's bits, the right and the left side of the cannons and the mouthpiece, this part of the bit is called a cannon, all right, cannon. They're actually different sizes on purpose. It's the right and the left if it's put on right side up. So a lot of people don't realize that. So if you have a bit with a triangle on it, I don't care who manufactures. For example, this one does. I don't know if you can see it. No, unfortunately, it's really too shiny. It's too shiny. It has a bit on the left-hand side. It points forward, and I know I have it. Now, the other thing, if you have a bit that doesn't have a triangle, most manufacturers will stamp their name or something on the cannon. That's another way for you to tell that your bit is right side up. I'll say, do you realize your bit's upside down? They'll say, well, how do you know? I'll say, well, look at the writing. The writing's upside down. They stamp the bits, and the bit, as you go to put it, like if I were the horse and you're going to put this bit on me, I should be able to read the writing on the bit. That's how you know the bit is right side up. Neue Schule has the turtle bits, and on the center of this little lozenge, there's a turtle. And they say, don't drown the turtle. So you always make sure that the turtle is with its feet pointing down and its little head pointing up. So that's one of the things that they have done. But let me quickly talk about why size is so important. Before I do that, do we have any questions that I should answer now?
Yeah, there are a few other questions. Why don't you finish your thought and then we'll come back to these questions.
Okay, so why size is so important. All right, so the cannons here, the center here is called the feature. The feature. These little loops here are called proud loops. If a bit is fitted properly, the feature here is in the center of the mouth. If it's fitted properly, when a rider takes rein tension, the feature stays in the center of the mouth. It is not displaced here, right? Here. It stays here. Doesn't go over here. If a bit's too big, and as I said, 70% of the bits I encounter are too big. So the bit is going wink, 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 wink the whole time. Fit, if the bit is fit right, it stays where it's supposed to be. Now, why I'm on that thought, another wives' tale. My bodywork person told me the bit is sitting on the bars. Now, there's possibility and probability. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. Because unless you have displaced the tongue by pulling it so hard to the side, the tongue always sits under the bit. Always. Unless, of course, it gets its tongue over the bit. So, more than likely, the bit is not sitting on the bars. It can sit on the margins of the tongue over the bars, yes. And the bars are very sensitive. If you've ever stuck your finger in there and felt the bars, which I have done thousands of times, there are round bars, very sharp bars, thick bars. You know, some have more covering on them than others. But the tongue's job is to make a place for the bit. So it is highly unlikely, again, as I said, unless you have displaced the tongue, which is possible, that the bit is not sitting on the bars. It's sitting on the tongue. But if you are a small-mouthed horse, like a 5-inch mouth horse, and you have a 5 3/4 bit, that feature now is no longer sitting on the center of the tongue, which is where it's accommodating for this. Now it's sitting on top of the margins of the tongue that are over the bars. And it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable and it's ineffective. So that's why fit is so important. If it fit right. You know, I was called down to Wellington one time. Somebody said, "We've got a really difficult chestnut mare. Will you come help us?" And I said, "Sure." I packed up and I went down there and I watched this woman pull the bit, a loose ring, so that I could see the center feature out the side of the horse's mouth. I thought, whoa, all right, what am I supposed to do now? And the trainer says, "Well, what can you do?" And I said, "Well, we're gonna put an egg butt Verdun on that bridle." Didn't she do that? She pulled an egg butt Verdun so far sideways that I could see the beginning of the center feature. I've never seen it since. I've only seen it once, but it is possible. So fit is very, very important. Fit is extremely important. If it's too small, it's like you're trying to run in a child's sneaker. If it's too big, it's like you're trying to run in a pair of size 13 basketball shoes. You're going to curl up your toes and try to keep those shoes on. So that's why fit is so important, because if it's on and it's just where it's supposed to be, the horse can concentrate on what you're telling it, not on, oh, the bit's sliding all over the place and it's really annoying me. One of the things I really get worried about when I start a bit fitting, and I'll say, "Well, tell me about your horse." And they say, "Oh, he never touches the reins. Isn't he good?" Really? That horse is so stoic that he's figured out how for you not to bother him because you're not touching the reins. He's figured out how to carry himself, to keep his head in a false frame and go right along so that you're not constantly fussing. How do you communicate with the horse if you're not communicating through the bit, through the reins, through your hands? You have to have something in your hands. It doesn't mean that they have to be like an elephant in your hands, but that's how we communicate. So, you know, be mindful, think, how much do I have in my hands? How does this feel? What are they telling me? So let's get to this question.
Sorry, is that what you meant? Sorry.
Okay.
All right, so they're appropriate for this time. So there's this question is using a snaffle, do you use the same size width bit, whether it's a fixed ring or a loose ring?
Fixed ring. Yes. Yes. Most snaffles, either fixed or loose, are about 16 millimeters. Some are thinner. For example, another wives' tale, but it answers the question. We used to believe thin bits were mean, right? Thin bits were really harsh.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got a fat tongue, a short smile, a low palate, and fat lips, and I stick a big fat bit in there, am I being kind? No. You need a 12 millimeter bit for a horse like that. Or you need a 14 millimeter bit for a horse like that. If you have a long smile, a long thin tongue, a very nice high domed palate, thin lips, then use a 16. There's very little reason to use an 18 or 20, 22. You don't need that. So stick somewhere between 12 and 16. So the fatter the tongue, the shorter the smile, the thicker the lips, try 12 or 14. I hope that answered the question.
Good.
I have a little bit to add on to that question of how can, so for example, we're doing these bit clinics virtually. So like when you send me a few bits for my horse, how can I know that it's the right width for his mouth?
Okay, you mean the thickness?
Yes, thickness.
Okay, so when you send me those pictures, I've already looked at how long that smile is, how thick those lips are. I'm going to ask you what the breed is. I will even get down to I even know some lines, what their mouths are like, based on seeing 5,000 horses over the last handful of years. I'll say, what lines is this horse? And I will know. Other things to look for is make sure your dentistry is up. All right. I one time had people, and I'm not just going into stories here, but say, oh, my horse is terrible. My horse is terrible. He's shaking his head. He's shaking his head. And I went and opened his mouth, and here he'd gotten kicked in the field and had 3 fractured molars. Another time, somebody says, oh, my young horse is horrible, horrible, doesn't like any bit. I opened his mouth. He looked like a shark. He had 2 rows of teeth on the bottom, 2 rows of teeth on the top, because he had not shed his baby teeth. It's like, didn't you look in here? Or cats, or feel for their wolf teeth. Or maybe you have a mare who has canines. 25% of mares have canines. They can have 1 to 4 canines. Sometimes the tusks get so long that a horse does this because the canines are clunking together. So a lot of modern dentistry will now take the tusks down. We don't need fighting teeth anymore. Most of our horses are more than well fed. They're not fighting for food anymore, right? So we don't need those big canines anymore. But those are things. Look in their mouths, or have a dentist look in their mouths. More questions. Did I answer your question? You sent me pictures, right, Emily? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I sent questions, or I sent pictures, and I'll send pictures when we try the bits as well.
Yeah.
All right. So another one was, what difference does the circumference of the rings make?
Okay. Typically, a Bridle ring is 55 millimeters. And I talked about why we needed a small ring to accommodate the cheek hangers for the curve. Most snaffles, like this snaffle here, this is a 70 millimeter ring. This egg butt is also 70 millimeters. So most standard snaffles are going to be 70 millimeter rings in a snaffle. Whether it's even a D will measure is based on a 70 millimeter circumference for a ring, even if it's a D, or an egg butt, it's a 70 millimeter ring. There are some, for example, Neue Schule, some of the other manufacturers have a 65 millimeter ring. It's ever perceptibly a little bit smaller, but I'll use that on refined headed horses or in ponies. I mean, to see a pony with a huge 70 millimeter ring on it, a small pony or a medium pony, that's all you see is that. So I will use Bridle rings. I'll use 65 millimeter rings so that I will accommodate, especially where the cheekbones end and where the commissures of the mouth are. You only have so much room to accommodate a ring. Most horses comfortably accommodate a 70 millimeter ring. In the same regard, people will say to me, I'll say, that horse has got a very refined head. You could ride that horse on your snaffle bridle in a Bridle. there is no rule, USEF, USDF, that says you cannot ride in a Bridle ring for a snaffle bridle. No rule. If that's what fits your horse well, that's what you do. I didn't bring it downstairs here, but I have what I call my traveling shop of horrors. And when people present very, I'm going to call it uniquely interesting bits to me, I try to get them from them or to have them give them to me. First of all, I've taken them out of the hands of the traveling public, and that's my public service. And I have rings that are the size of basketballs. And I said, what are you doing with this thing? You know, oh, you know, it's what I had. So then it just becomes ludicrous. It's ineffective. But 70, 65, 55 for the Bridles. Other questions?
All right, so Emily actually wanted to know, so what's the best way to clean a bit?
You're probably gonna laugh. If you're not going to stay after it with rinsing them in a bucket of water, you can put them in the top rack of your dishwasher and take them out before the heat cycle.
Yeah.
You know, my 88-year-old mother would open the dishwasher and there'd be like a whole thing of bits, and she'd say, "What are you doing?" You know, it's like there's no reason not to. You know, but you can take a fine like no scratch scar pad, and dishwashing soap is one of the best things you can do to get the crud off them. If you have a fixed cheek and it is squeaking, they squeak because we feed a lot of treats, and treats get down in here where this joint is. They get down there, sugar, carrots, all the other peppermint things that we give horses, and then they squeak. And so if you clean the bit well and then put a little bit of even clipper oil down there, that'll keep it from squeaking. But you know, that's a good question. Yeah. But you can put them in the dishwasher, just take them out before the heat cycle.
Good to know.
Other questions?
Yeah. So Karen is asking, she said, I use a round rubber bit side protectors on my horse to protect the corners of his mouth. But they're not legal. Are there any alternatives?
Having a bit that fits right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need it. If the bit fits right, you don't need to worry about those rings pinching. One of the things that Neue Schule has done is it has beveled out right here where the ring goes into the cannon. You cannot see it here, but it has beveled out the hole where the ring goes. That is done specifically to prevent pinching. They have even done on their Waterford bits, adding a little tiny, it's almost like a throat on the last ball. Well, Waterford bits are the ones with the balls. Balls, and then it would just end at the cheeks. The cheeks would go through the last ball. Well, what they did is they added a little tiny lip shelf. And so the lips sit on this lip shelf and the rings turn so that they've avoided the pinch that way. But that's what Neue Schule has done to address pinching. Really quickly, if you have young horses, one of the things I really recommend with young horses is to put them in fixed cheek bits. Put them in the D's, put them in the egg butts, because fixed cheek bits help with lateral stability, especially of the shoulders. You know, I watch a lot of young horses go, and typically, and you can tell me, you can throw a yellow BS flag down, but most young horses fall out through the shoulder around the corner, and they carry themselves with their haunches to the inside, right? It's hard for them to keep lateral balance. One way to help young horses with lateral balance is to put them in a fixed cheek. Fixed cheek gives them more sensory input and helps stabilize the shoulders. Who would have thought, right? Now, another thing that Neue Schule has that currently, because they have the patent on it, is the turtle bits. Okay, what's different about a turtle bit? Here's a traditional bit, right? It can go this way, it can go this way, it can go this way, it can go this, it can do all this in the mouth, right? the turtle bits, and everything we have is legal. The turtle bits in their design, they don't go forward. They don't lock, but they don't continue like this bit. Here we are, it's in the horse's mouth. Horse starts to lean, it leans, it leans, it leans, it leans, and we pull back, right? Here it's trying to get its balance, we pull back. In the turtle bits, because of their design, it forms a temporary mullen. It's a mullen, and therefore it's easier for the horse to establish longitudinal balance. We always think about lateral, and you always hear about get the horse's bum to tuck, get their legs underneath them. How are they supposed to do that if they're continually falling forward on the bit, and we're continually trying to bring them back, and we're trying to get the shoulders up, and trying to get the tuck the bum, and trying to get the legs underneath them? They need help with longitudinal balance. And that's where the turtle bits come into play. So when I'm watching film of horses and I see the horse go on the forehand and the rider work to get the horse back off the forehand, and it's doing all this stuff to help maintain its balance by using its head and its neck, I think, maybe we should use one of the turtle bits. This happens to be the turtle tactio. It was specifically designed for our fat-lipped, fat-tongued, short-smiled, not very much room, most of the warm bloods that we have nowadays. This was the original turtle bit. You see how much larger the center lozenge is? It also has a more traditional shape. Let me cut this off the cord. Let me see if I do have scissors here. Because I will be sending out to some of you turtle bits because they're so good to work with. This is called the turtle top. See how it will lay over the tongue versus the turtle tactio. See its shape? The turtle tactio has pressure on the center of the tongue, nothing on the palate, nothing over the margins of the tongue that are over the bars. The turtle top is a little bit more traditional in its shape. Yes, there's pressure on the center of the tongue, but we have perhaps a little bit of pressure on the palate. We have a little bit of pressure over the margins of the tongue that are over the bars. But because of this, because it can't continue to go forward, the horse establishes its balance. You can take right, you can take left, you can do all this other little hooly here, but it helps the horse maintain his longitudinal balance, which means it's easier for them to lift their shoulders, which means it's easier for them to tuck their bums and get their legs underneath them. So I have a lot of upper level dressage horses that use the tactile on the Bridle because it really helps them and makes it easier for them to get the shoulders up, to do those pirouettes, to do the tempies, to do the 9.5 million flying changes they have to do. Other questions?
Wow. All right, so Bernadette asks, what's your opinion on rubber bits?
Okay. We used to think that putting young horses, particularly in rubber or plastic, was good. But research, and you know how they say, stick with the science. Research has shown that rubber and plastic result in two things. A, they teach a horse to lean. B, they teach a horse to chew or to chomp. And one of the frequent things that I get told is my horse is chomping, 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 chomping. I'll say, do you have a rubber or plastic bit? Well, yes. Somebody just sent me a Neue Schule questionnaire and said my horse chomped through their bit in like 2 weeks of using their bit. Like, wow. I mean, really? But they used to think it was a good thing. They're being kind. You go in the hunter barns and 9.5 million happy mouth bits. And they're all chewed and they all have hard plastic things sticking out everywhere in the horse's mouth and the tongue and the palate and all that. And then what they try to be kind is they wrap latex around it, right? So now they have this huge thing in the center of the horse's mouth because they're being kind because the horse chewed through the bit. Just don't buy them. buy a decent metal bit and have it fit right. And, you're not going to be like everybody else. I go into their barn, they'll say, oh, I have a bag of bits. I have a box of bits. In Europe, they put them on walls. And I take pictures of the walls of bits because some of them are just truly, there's like a medieval torture chamber. And so I like take pictures of them and blow them up because it's fascinating. Other questions?
Diane asked, what is the function of the neutral
Verbinden. Verbinden is another word for unity.
Thanks, Diane. You made me say it.
Verbinden, yes. I always get verbinden. It's verbinden. Verbinden is one of the first bits that Neue Schule put out. I wish I had one here. The verbinden is a bit that I will use a lot of time with horses that have trouble coming over on the vertical. Maybe, they're pretty well on their way to training, but they're still having trouble lifting their shoulders. They're having trouble coming over on the vertical. And the verbinden, for those that aren't familiar, has a very unique shape. It's sort of shaped this way. And when they are put in this bit that is shaped this way, right, it allows them to come over in the pole and to bring the shoulders up. And when they can lift the shoulders up here, that's when it's easier for them to tuck their bums. Mm-hmm. That's when it's easier for them to keep themselves coming through and keep their legs up underneath themselves. That's the purpose of the verbinden. There is now some other horses that perhaps don't totally have all the strength and the balance they need to go in the verbinden. They may get stuck behind in the verbinden, or they may try to get above the verbinden. And so what Neue Schule did is they lessened this angle to something like this. That's called the starter. Not that it's just for baby horses, but I had a 17 two-hand South Florence that in the verbinden, he would duck behind it. So I put him in a starter bit, and he was comfortable because of how he was balanced with his anatomy in the starter bit to be right where he needed to be. So it's a variation of a theme, but verbinden's a great bit. It also comes in a fixed cheek. So it also comes in a pelham. Most of the bits, I can either get them in D's or I can get them in egg butts or certainly loose rings or even pelhams for my eventer people. Other questions?
Daphne asked, what kind of bit would you use on a horse that avoids contact?
The verbinden would be one of them. Depending on the age of the horse, I would first of all try what's called the trans-angled lozenge. This is a trans. This happens to be a trans egg butt. But the trans was designed to have the horse seek contact, to go forward and downward into the contact. And it does that because these cannons are actually rotated slightly. You can't tell that by looking at it here, but if you said, my horse avoids my hands, I can't get him to take contact, one of the bits that I would send Daphne or that person would be a trans-angled lozenge. And depending on the age, would be dependent on whether I would send it in a fixed cheek or a loose ring. An older horse that perhaps maybe had some bad experiences with various bits, I might send a loose ring trans to help them, or I would send a starter would be another one. Good question.
And Daphne also asked, how does the bit with the metal balls work? I suppose you're talking about the Waterford, Daphne?
Yeah, the Waterford. Okay, I like to use the Waterfords for horses that get very strong. For example, I did a lot of fox hunting horses in Europe, where they are jumping those huge ditches. I mean, those ditches are 7 feet wide and they're 7 feet deep, and you want to be able to collect that horse up so that you don't get run away with, or with children who are in the hunt field, or my eventers that have a horse that is so excited about what it's doing out there that it just ignores its rider and basically you have a semi-controlled runaway. I will use the Waterford because they can't grab it. Because it's all these little balls, they cannot grab and fix on that bit because it's always doing this. And so that's really great if you have a horse that has a tendency to run away with somebody, or somebody who's not strong who wants to event. Then I will put them in a Waterford. They're not legal in dressage, but for eventing cross country and stadium, they are. Other questions?
All right, so Kelly asked, she has a Dutch harness horse with a very high headset. And she's wondering which bit would you recommend for her?
I just did one of these. I would prefer to see it go so that I could see how high it was and where. But Verbinden would be a good bit for a horse like that with a high head carriage, because we want to try to get that horse to come over and to come into the contact that way. A lot of them, their necks are so straight up that we need something to help them come over that way. So the Verbinden would be definitely one that I would send for that person to try.
That is mostly our questions. I actually have a couple questions, if you indulge me.
Sure.
So I was wondering, like, how often do you change bits or readdress the bit? Like, well, for me, I've got a horse that I've had for 10 years, and so I'm pretty much riding the same bit, right?
Yeah.
So.
That's a great question, and not one that I don't encounter fairly frequently. So if you start out with a bit you feel you're effective in, and all of a sudden things get harder, or that you're asking different questions of, then it's an opportunity to try something different. Perhaps that horse needs to be balanced in another way. What bits do is it changes the working angles for that horse. It's actually a mechanical thing. So when I look at a horse, I'm looking at all different kinds of angles between its tongue, the bit, the reins, where the angles that the rider's at, and all those. It's a mechanical thing that if all of a sudden I'm asking the horse, okay, we're going to do a lot more collection now. I might, and it's very hard for them to do collection in the bit that they're in. We might change the bit, have the horse get strong, and then you may end up going back to that bit, or you may be in a bit and all of a sudden say, something's wrong. Maybe the pressure points need to change. Then you go to something simpler. Go to a simple bit, ride in a couple weeks in a simpler bit or a different bit, and then come back to the bit that you were, and then you'll find out that you'll continue to go up again. So a lot of times we say, if you plateau and you're having trouble, could be that there's pressure points that you don't realize that that horse is encountering at that time. Change something out. Don't throw your bits away. Don't sell them. Everybody wants to run out and sell their bits right away. Keep them. Come back to them in a couple more weeks. Ride a few more times in it and see if you don't start going up again. So that was a great question. But to think that you're going to have one bit and forever till death do us part, so help me God, that's unlikely. It's possible, but not probable. How's that?
It didn't last with my marriage either, so.
Okay.
Janet's got a question, but I'm going to ask one more. Just get my while I was saying, oh shoot, the other thing I was thinking about is because we talked about bridle fit and certainly in bit fit as well. What are the signs that things are not fitting well, especially like for the bridle, that we don't,
Good question. Okay, so one of the things I look for and I encounter frequently is crown pieces that are too small. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you'll see the cheek hangers get pulled up to the corners of the eye. The cheek hangers should not be at the corners of the eye. They should be back towards the TMJ of the horse. So I will not infrequently say, you really should think about a larger crown piece. so that we get this pulled back off their eyes. Also, if you have a nice fitting crown piece, it pulls it away from the ears. I see some poor horses, their ears are like this because the bridle, the crown piece is so small, the whole thing is smashed forward on the horse's head. I don't care if the crown, if the this over here, I mean the brow band is this thick. If it's pulled forward and smashing the ears, what good is it? Really? Everybody's worried about all this cushion, and not the fit. You know, the same thing. Watch how big the cabochons are, how wide they are. Sometimes I encounter people buy these very expensive bridles with these big cabochons, and they actually make the bit stick out sideways because they're too big, they're too thick. So be aware of that. So make sure that your brow band is big enough, should be back off the ears, that the nose band is not interfering with the where the bits are able to sit. You should have a padded chin piece there. There are so many, bridle manufacturers out there. I sometimes simpler is best, and I have people that they have a new horse and they go out and they buy all this new stuff and it doesn't fit. It really doesn't fit. So sometimes I just stick with simpler is best, and until you really get to learn what your horse likes, but make sure it's back up off the ears. That's one of the most important things you can do for your horse.
Okay, all right, great.
Good question.
All right, I'll go back to Janet's question then. So she said, regarding the Waterford, I have a off the track thoroughbred jumper and she leans forward and pulls. So I just got one to try. And but what could I use in dressage? So if it's not legal in dressage, then.
Is the horse a rooter? Does it root in her hands? Do we know?
I don't know. Janet, do you know? Or sorry, where are you? Because I've a new message. No, not a rooter.
Janet, not a rooter. I would try a turtle bit.
Turtle bit?
Yep. I would try a turtle bit. It's legal for dressage. Normally I find that I do a lot of really high level eventers. And if we find one mouthpiece that works well for dressage, I'm usually able to take that mouthpiece into the other phases, unless we have somebody that really is in a very exuberant cross country. But a lot of times I can take one mouthpiece and I can use it in all three phases and just change the cheeks to it. So that I might take a turtle, put it in a pelham to give myself more leverage out in, out cross country. Or I may change it into, there's what we call the Neue Schule jumper line, which gives me the ability to have a little bit more leverage for stadium. So they've made it kind of easy for me as a bit fitter, because if I understand the phase that a person is doing and really what the requirements are for that, a lot of times I can just change the cheeks, because the horse loves the mouthpiece. I just give the rider more ability to be effective with it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. All right. So so Daphne, it's building on that, but anyway, she said jumpers use so many different, very creative bits. Some that you've been photographing, I believe, right?
Yes, I have. My shop of horrors.
Right. And she said, I understand the need for control for safety reasons, but cringe at a lot of what is out there. I may be of ignorance, but what's your opinion on that? So
I agree with you totally. A lot of times there's no words. There's no words for some of the things I see. I mean, I love horses. I love what I do, but I see an abomination: bicycle chains, double twisted wires, huge balls. I just,
yeah.
you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, because I know what they do. I know, I think those horses have a very hard life and a very short shelf life, many of them, because of what they're asked to do. But you know, as long as people pay to put their butts in the seat, they're going to do it. So, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I try to work with the people. I have so many great customers that are trying to do, like I said, Neue Schule is about the welfare of the horse. What they do is for the welfare of the horse. And so that's what I try to bit fit for the welfare of the horse.
Sure.
Give the rider the ability. I mean, we all want to live, you know, nobody wants to crash and burn. But if I can give you the tools in a very fair way to the horse to do it, then that's what I try to do.
Terrific. Terrific. Thanks for that. Carrie, I think we're getting close to, we've got a few of these because I know we've taken a lot more of your time than we expected, but we've all been so interested. I just lost her question. Okay. How should the bridle fit around the ears and band? Difference between this, maybe you may have difference between padded versus non-padded.
Yeah, you know, the padded, because everybody's concerned about pole pressure. Everybody thinks, oh, you know, for example, bouchers or bouchers, however you want, potato, tomato, tomato. Bouchers actually have negative pole pressure.
Really?
Everybody, yes, they're negative too.
Well,
I mean, there's another wives' tale, right? Another wives' tale. Bouchers are -2 on the pole pressure. Most bits like this are 1, 2 sometimes on pole pressure. So, you know, the boucher is a wonderful bit. It's also legal in dressage. And it has, if you have a horse that is very sensitive to pole pressure, use a boucher. But, you know, padded crowns are very good because they will relieve it, because it's one of the pressure points of the bridle is the crown right behind the ears specifically and at the top. And you'll see some bridle manufacturers now that are putting 2 pads on either side of the middle of the bridle. Instead of being a full thick pad, they'll put 2 pads on either side of the middle to take the pressure off. Because, you know, a lot of the horses right under their forelock have that kind of bony protuberance there, but the pads on either side of that, then they go back off the cups of the ears. They should be back off the cups of the ears. But again, you can achieve that with an unpadded bridle if your brow band is the right size. You can get it back where they've got musculature in order to support that, and it's not resting on the bony protuberances of the skull. Oh, another thing, real quick. Some of you deal with ponies, all right? Here's a newsflash for you. Their mouths are the same size as horse mouths. And just because your horse is 17.2 doesn't mean that they wear a 6.5 bit, all right? I've seen 15-hand PREs wear a 6-inch bit. I have a 16 3-hand Dutch that wears a 5 for Dune and a 4 3/4 curve. So just because a horse is big doesn't mean it needs a big bit. Ponies don't, you know, I mean, do I have 4.5-inch bits? Yes, but most likely that pony has a 5-inch mouth. It just has a smaller case that it's put in, that's all. But a lot of people think the inverse, and everybody tells me how sensitive their horse is. Horses are sensitive. Your horse is probably more sensitive than everybody else in this screen. Everybody's horse is sensitive. So that's what we have to take into account. It's making sure that we're tapped in to what that horse is feeling and what we're doing here. I think a lot of us, because we touch so much continually, we filter a lot of this out. We're touching things all the time, and we don't know that. We don't feel like, oh, I'm touching this, I'm touching that. But the horse knows we're there. The horse feels it. And so we just need to be tapped into what it is that we're feeling and how much that we're feeling through our hands, through that bit. Other questions?
We mostly, there are a lot of thank yous, because I think people, you know, we're getting long, but
Yes.
Audrey asked, which is totally appropriate. She said, please share the protocol Florence wants us to follow using for the bit
Excellent.
fitting. And
Okay, excellent.
can I share my screen now? So that, because
Yes.
Elizabeth so kindly offered to share her photographs and her videos so that we can give a little demonstration. So I'm going to just share
Sure.
that quickly. And
Yes.
so first of all, and I'm going to just help you a little bit with that. So you guys can
Yes.
see my screen, right? Right? Yes?
Yep, I can.
All right, so we have the link that you guys had for this event, right? Which is to a post on our website, and I suppose probably on the Brazos as well. Brazos.
We have it on our Facebook page. We don't have it on our website yet.
Okay. All right. So anyway, so you have this was the link to the meeting right there, and then there is a link to the bidding form, and I just cobbled this thing together quickly. But anyway, so you're going to get something like this, which can you please go the other room? Thank you. Anyway, so you're going to give Florence some information here, and you're going to, which I forgot to add, Florence, was you need to add a phone number to this as well. And then you can
put it anywhere.
Yeah, send this form to Florence. Okay. And then the other thing is that there are several, it's a little bit hard to do this just with all of my things here. So, so anyway, so these are some of the, they're a series of photographs that Florence needs. So different profiles of your horse and a photograph of your bits on the bridle. Whoops, sorry, it's grabbing the wrong thing there. And then there's like 30 seconds of trot and canter in each direction. There's like 20 to 30 seconds,
right.
Something like that. So, and there goes Rose. Woo. With Eula.
There goes Rose.
There goes Rose. Anyway, so all right, I'm going to stop sharing. But
Super. Yes, that's what I need. I need 3 photographs of the horse's head with the bridle on, the right, the left, and straight on. And if you can get fairly close with those photos, that helps me see how that bridle is fitting, how your current bit is fitting. The picture of the bit itself I need, because that's going to give me some insight into what I see when I watch your videos. I'm going to say, okay, that bit is resulting in that ride. And that helps me, because remember, I'm going to be taking that up and parsing it out and drawing angles and doing all kinds of things with that video in order to figure out exactly how we need to balance your horse. Remember, it's mechanics. I'm going to be looking at how I can improve the mechanics of your horse's balance. So it's 30 seconds of trot and canter. Doesn't have to be in an arena, doesn't have to be in a covered, can be outside in your backyard. You know, just go around and around in circles, change, go around and around the circles, give me some canter, and that's it. This is a no judgment free or a judgment free zone. All right. So you can't do what I haven't seen. All right. You would have to be very creative to come up with something that I haven't seen before. So, but I need those videos, and that helps me. Please put your phone number on that form so that I can call you and talk to you about the videos that you sent me. When you send your information, please put your name on it, because it's not just here for Brazos in South Florida. I'm all over North America, so I get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and it's important for me to be able to identify whose they are, so that I can say, oh, okay, I know where it is, and this is the work I've done with that, and here it is in this folder. So that's why it's important.
For sure.
Anything else?
And the easiest way to send the video was through WhatsApp.
WhatsApp is the easiest way to send video.
Yeah. So I think that's it for our questions. And,
Super.
So, but anyway, so I want to thank you very, very much because this has
Thank you.
really been amazing. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's been amazing to share it with all of you guys. So,
Yeah, your videos, once we get the right bits, then we will have more videos. I need more videos. If I send you 2 bits, you sit in verbinden, like the picture that we put up there on your website, that was a verbinden. So you say, oh, this is my trot and canter in the verbinden. This is my trot and canter in the turtle. And we'll call you and I'll talk about, hey, this is what I see in this bit. What did that feel like? What did you think? What do you see? And we'll talk back and forth that way. But we need the videos as we're going through. That's what the video analysis is all about. It's like telemedicine.
yeah, terrific, terrific. So, all right.
All right.
Thank you.
My
That's-
pleasure. Thank you, guys.
So,
Thank you very,
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you for being here with us.
You're welcome. Now let's get those ponies going, hey?
yeah,
Ah!
I can't wait
Yeah.
to send you a video.
yeah.
Super. Yes, please.
I'm
Please.
convinced I probably have an upside down too big.
Everybody's going to run home and into the barn and take a look at what's upside down.
So, okay.
But that's great. All right. Thank you, guys.
All righty. Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Yeah.